In Psalm 91, He is your refuge and fortress. Every hidden trap is exposed and destroyed. Psalm 91 stands as one of the most powerful declarations of divine protection ever written. Across centuries, it has been whispered in times of fear, proclaimed in moments of danger, and trusted when the path ahead was unclear. Its words do not offer shallow comfort or temporary reassurance. Instead, they reveal a profound spiritual reality, that those who dwell in God do not merely survive the storms of life, but remain untouched at their core, guarded by an authority far greater than any visible threat. This psalm is not a charm, nor is it a poetic exaggeration meant to soothe the anxious mind. It is a covenantal promise rooted in spiritual law. Psalm 91 unveils how God operates as both refuge and fortress, exposing hidden traps before they can destroy you, and dismantling unseen dangers before they ever reach your life. It speaks to dangers you recognize and to threats you never saw coming. It addresses physical harm, emotional attacks, spiritual warfare, and silent schemes designed to derail your calling. In a world filled with uncertainty, manipulation, betrayal, and unseen spiritual resistance, Psalm 91 reveals a deeper truth. Not all danger announces itself. Some traps are subtle, some threats wear friendly faces. Some attacks come not with noise, but with delay, confusion, and slow erosion of faith. This is why the promise of refuge matters. Refuge is not escape, it is divine positioning. Fortress is not isolation, it is impenetrable covering. This reflection will guide you deeply into the meaning of Psalm 91, showing how God exposes what is hidden, neutralizes what is dangerous, and preserves those who choose to dwell in Him. You will see that protection is not random, nor is it reserved for a select few. It flows from intimacy, trust, and spiritual alignment. As you walk through each section, you will understand why no snare, no plot, no spiritual ambush can succeed against a life anchored in God. Dwelling in the secret place, the foundation of divine protection. Psalm 91 does not begin with a promise of safety. It begins with a condition. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. This opening statement establishes the spiritual foundation upon which every other promise in the psalm rests. Protection, according to Scripture, is not accidental. It is positional. To dwell is not to visit. It is not a momentary prayer, a desperate cry, or a seasonal devotion. To dwell means to remain, to settle, to live continually in alignment with God's presence. The secret place is not a physical location. It is a spiritual state. It represents intimacy with God that is unseen by others but deeply known by Him. This is why it is called secret. It is not public performance, religious appearance, or outward ritual. It is the hidden life of trust, surrender, and obedience. Those who dwell there are not merely protected because they believe in God, but because they have learned to live within His authority. Many people desire the promises of Psalm 91 without embracing its posture. They want protection without intimacy, deliverance without discipline, and covering without surrender. But Scripture is precise. Dwelling comes before shadow. Abiding comes before defense. The shadow of the Almighty does not cover those who run in and out of His presence. It covers those who remain. When you dwell in God, you are no longer exposed to the environment in the same way others are. Just as a fortress shields its inhabitants from external assault, dwelling in God alters how spiritual forces can access you. Hidden traps lose their effectiveness not because they disappear, but because they are revealed or neutralized before they can act. This is why many believers experience unexplained protection. They avoid accidents they never knew were coming. They are spared betrayals they never saw forming. They escape consequences they did not earn. This is not luck, it is dwelling. The secret place also sharpens spiritual perception. When you live close to God, discernment becomes instinctive. You sense when something is off. You feel unease without clear explanation. You are redirected without understanding why. These internal warnings are not paranoia, they are divine signals. God often exposes traps not by dramatic visions, but by quiet restraint. He causes delay when haste would lead to harm. He closes doors that looked promising. He disrupts plans that seemed logical. In hindsight, these interruptions reveal themselves as protection. Dwelling also requires trust. You cannot remain in the secret place while clinging to control. Many traps succeed because people insist on their own understanding. They override spiritual warning signs with logic, desire, or impatience. But those who dwell in God learn to yield. They wait. They listen. They obey even when it does not make immediate sense. This posture dismantles traps before they form. The fortress imagery in Psalm 91 reinforces this reality. A fortress is not passive. It is designed for defense, visibility, and strength. From within a fortress, enemies are seen before they arrive. Attacks are anticipated. Entry points are guarded. God as a fortress means nothing reaches you without first passing through his authority. This does not mean trouble never comes near. It means trouble cannot penetrate what God has secured. Importantly, dwelling is not perfection. It is consistency. It is returning to God even after failure. It is choosing his presence over distraction, his truth over fear, and his timing over impatience. Every time you choose to remain instead of retreat, you strengthen your position. Over time, this creates a spiritual environment where hidden traps cannot survive. Psalm 91 teaches that exposure precedes destruction. God does not always eliminate danger instantly, but he always reveals it in time. The enemy relies on secrecy. God thrives in light. When you dwell in him, hidden things surface. Deceptive people reveal themselves. False opportunities lose their appeal. Dangerous paths feel heavy instead of exciting. This is the quiet power of dwelling. To dwell is to live under divine intelligence. It is to operate with insight beyond your natural capacity. It is to be shielded not only from visible harm, but from unseen manipulation. This is why Psalm 91 begins where it does. Before arrows, before plagues, before enemies, before angels, there is dwelling. If you want the fortress, you must choose the secret place. If you desire exposure of hidden traps, you must remain close enough to God to hear his warnings. Protection is not claimed, it is lived. If this message is strengthening your faith and helping you understand the deeper power of Psalm 91, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next part of this series. Each upcoming topic will take you further into how God exposes, dismantles, and destroys every hidden threat against your life. Under his wings, how divine covering neutralizes fear, attack, and spiritual intimidation. Psalm 91 continues unfolding its promise by shifting from the language of traps to the language of covering. He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge. This imagery introduces a different dimension of divine protection. While the snare speaks of hidden danger and deception, the wings speak of proximity, warmth, authority, and identity. Protection here is no longer just about escape, but about belonging. It is not only about avoiding harm, but about being enveloped by God's presence in such a way that fear itself loses power. The image of wings is intentional. In nature, wings are not merely for flight. They are used for shielding the vulnerable, guiding the young, and asserting dominance over territory. When Scripture says God covers you with his wings, it is not describing weakness or fragility. It is describing authority exercised through closeness. Those under his wings are not exposed targets. They are protected offspring. This covering is relational, not mechanical. It flows from intimacy, not distance. Fear is one of the enemy's most effective weapons. Even when no attack occurs, fear alone can paralyze faith, distort perception, and lead people into destructive decisions. Psalm 91 directly addresses this reality by stating, "You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day." This promise is not a denial of danger. It is a declaration that fear no longer governs the one who is covered. Fear loses its jurisdiction where divine covering is active. Spiritual intimidation often precedes spiritual attack. The enemy seeks to exhaust the mind before engaging the life. Thoughts of dread, anticipation of disaster, constant vigilance, and imagined outcomes all function to weaken trust. Under God's wings, this cycle is broken. Covering does not remove awareness, but it restores perspective. You see danger without being consumed by it. You acknowledge reality without surrendering peace. Nighttime terror represents unseen, undefined threats. It is fear without clarity. It is anxiety without evidence. It is the mind creating scenarios the heart cannot control. Daytime arrows represent visible, intentional attacks. Words spoken against you, actions taken to harm you, opposition you can identify. Psalm 91 declares protection from both. God covers what you understand and what you cannot explain. His wings extend over conscious fear and subconscious anxiety. This covering also speaks to spiritual identity. Under his wings, you are not standing alone. You are not exposed, abandoned, or self-defending. You are positioned within God's authority. This shifts how attacks affect you. Words meant to wound lose their penetration. Accusations lose their weight. Threats lose their urgency. The covering absorbs what would have otherwise reached your heart. Many believers struggle not because attacks are too strong, but because they feel uncovered. They feel spiritually exposed, emotionally vulnerable, and internally unguarded. Psalm 91 addresses this by restoring the truth of proximity. God does not protect from afar. He covers from above and around. His presence is not distant surveillance, it is immediate involvement. The wings also symbolize rest. Birds gather their young under their wings, not only during danger, but during storms. Covering provides stability when the environment is unstable. This is why those who dwell in God can experience peace even when circumstances remain unresolved. Peace is not the absence of storms, it is the presence of covering. Divine covering neutralizes spiritual intimidation by redefining safety. Safety is no longer dependent on control, certainty, or strength. It becomes dependent on trust. When trust replaces control, fear loses leverage. You no longer need to predict outcomes to feel secure. You no longer need to anticipate every threat. You rest under what God has already secured. Psalm 91 also emphasizes truth as part of this covering. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. Truth here is not abstract theology. It is lived reality. Truth defines what is real, what is lasting, and what has authority. Lies fuel fear. Truth dismantles it. When God's truth surrounds you, deception cannot anchor itself in your mind. False narratives lose credibility. Internal accusations lose their voice. Spiritual attacks often begin with distorted truth. The enemy questions God's faithfulness, exaggerates risk, minimizes purpose, and isolates the believer. Under God's covering, truth corrects these distortions. You remember who God is. You remember who you are. You remember what has already been promised. This remembrance is protective. It stabilizes the soul. The shield and buckler imagery reinforces this protection. A shield blocks frontal attacks, a buckler guards from close-range strikes. Together, they represent comprehensive defense. God's truth guards you from overt lies and subtle distortions. Nothing reaches you unfiltered. Everything must pass through truth before it can affect you. This covering does not mean you never feel pressure. It means pressure does not define you. You may feel the wind, but you are not swept away. You may hear the noise, but you are not shaken. You may recognize the threat, but you are not intimidated. Under his wings, fear has no final authority. Importantly, covering requires proximity. Wings do not protect those who wander far. This is not punishment, it is reality. Covering flows from closeness. When believers drift from God, fear often fills the vacuum. Anxiety increases, peace diminishes. But when they return, fear retreats. The environment changes because the position changes. Psalm 91 invites believers not to fight fear aggressively, but to rest intentionally. You do not defeat fear by arguing with it. You defeat fear by dwelling under covering. The more you abide, the less fear can speak. The more you trust, the less intimidation can influence you. This divine covering also reshapes how you view adversity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is God shielding me from through this?" Delays become protection, resistance becomes redirection, silence becomes shelter. Nothing is wasted when you are covered. Under his wings, you are not merely surviving spiritual warfare, you are preserved through it. Attacks lose momentum, fear loses urgency, anxiety loses dominance. Peace becomes your default posture, not because life is easy, but because God is near. If this teaching is strengthening your trust and helping you understand how God's covering silences fear and neutralizes spiritual intimidation, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next part. In the next topic, we will go deeper into how God commands angelic protection and ensures nothing can ultimately harm those who dwell in him. He shall give his angels charge over you. How divine authority operates beyond what you can see. Psalm 91 reaches one of its most profound revelations when it declares, "For he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways." This statement pulls back the veil between the visible and invisible realms and reveals a truth that radically alters how protection functions in the life of the believer. Protection is not merely an abstract promise or an emotional reassurance. It is an active system of divine authority operating continuously on your behalf. Angels are not symbolic metaphors in this passage. They are assigned agents, dispatched with purpose, governed by God's command, and aligned with his will concerning your life. This verse clarifies something essential. God's protection does not depend on your awareness of danger. It functions independently of your perception. Angels are charged to keep you, not after you recognize the threat, but before harm reaches you. This means divine intervention often occurs without your knowledge. You are protected from accidents that never happen, conflicts that never escalate, decisions that never finalize, and paths you never walk because intervention occurred before consequence. Angelic assignment is not random. The phrase "charge over you" implies responsibility, authority, and continuity. These beings are not visiting occasionally. They are stationed. They observe your ways, meaning your movements, decisions, transitions, and vulnerabilities. This does not mean your life is micromanaged or controlled. It means it is guarded. There is a difference. Guarding preserves freedom while preventing destruction. Psalm 91 also specifies that angels keep you in all your ways. This phrase is often overlooked, yet it carries deep significance. Your ways are not only physical paths, they include seasons, decisions, emotional states, spiritual transitions, and moments of weakness. God's protection is not limited to moments of strength. It extends into moments of confusion, fatigue, and uncertainty. Angels are not only present when you are spiritually strong. They are especially active when you are vulnerable. Many believers assume angelic protection is reserved for extraordinary moments, miracles, crises, or dramatic deliverance. Psalm 91 dismantles this assumption. The protection described is daily, consistent, and comprehensive. It operates quietly. It does not draw attention to itself. It functions best when unnoticed. This is why many people underestimate how often divine intervention has already occurred in their lives. The psalm continues by stating, "In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone." This imagery is not about dramatic rescue from catastrophe. It is about preventing small missteps that could cause long-term damage. A stone is not a mountain. It is an overlooked obstacle. Many lives are derailed, not by massive disasters, but by small, repeated injuries, minor compromises, emotional wounds, poor decisions, or unchecked habits. Angelic protection often works at this level, preserving you from cumulative harm. This reveals an important truth. God values continuity. He protects you not only from destruction, but from unnecessary damage that would slow your growth, distort your identity, or delay your calling. Angels intervene in ways that maintain momentum. They redirect timing. They influence encounters. They guard thresholds you don't recognize as dangerous. It is also significant that angels operate under command. They do not act independently. Their authority flows directly from God. This means their protection aligns perfectly with His purpose. They will not preserve what God intends to prune, nor will they allow destruction where God has declared preservation. This alignment ensures that protection never interferes with growth. Instead, it supports it. Psalm 91 also clarifies that divine protection does not remove responsibility. Angels keep you in your ways, not outside of them. This means you are still called to walk wisely, live faithfully, and remain aligned with God. Protection does not excuse recklessness. It does not endorse disobedience. When people misuse this promise to justify poor choices, they misunderstand its nature. Angels guard those who dwell, not those who defy. The presence of angels also redefines spiritual warfare. Many believers imagine spiritual warfare as a constant battle they must personally fight. Psalm 91 shifts this perspective. While vigilance is necessary, the burden of defense does not rest solely on you. God has already deployed forces beyond your capacity. You are not standing alone against unseen opposition. You are supported by an unseen infrastructure of divine authority. This awareness does not produce fear. It produces confidence, not arrogance but quiet assurance. You move through life differently when you understand that protection is already in motion. You take steps without paralysis. You obey without excessive fear of consequence. You trust without needing guarantees. This confidence is not self-generated. It is inherited from the reality of divine covering. The psalm goes further by declaring victory over threats. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. These symbols represent both overt and covert dangers, visible opposition and hidden venom. The promise is not merely avoidance, but authority. Protection matures into dominion. The believer does not merely escape harm, they overcome it. This authority is not aggressive domination, it is spiritual superiority. The enemy loses leverage, fear loses influence, intimidation loses power. You do not need to chase threats, they lose relevance in your presence. This is what happens when divine protection operates consistently over time. You become spiritually unmovable. It is essential to understand that angelic protection does not always change circumstances immediately. Sometimes it changes outcomes quietly. Sometimes it alters timing. Sometimes it removes individuals from your path. Sometimes it strengthens you internally rather than removing the external challenge. But always, it ensures that nothing contrary to God's purpose can ultimately succeed. Many people ask why they still face difficulty if they are protected. Psalm 91 does not promise the absence of challenge. It promises the failure of destruction. Difficulty may appear, but it will not define you. Pressure may come, but it will not crush you. Opposition may rise, but it will not prevail. Angels ensure that the line is never crossed. This protection extends across seasons. You are guarded in growth and guarded in waiting. You are guarded in clarity and guarded in confusion. You are guarded when you feel strong and guarded when you feel weak. This consistency is what allows faith to mature. You learn to trust not because life is predictable, but because God is faithful. Ultimately, Psalm 91 reveals that divine protection is not reactive, it is proactive. God does not wait for danger to strike before responding. He assigns, commands, and sustains protection continuously. Angels do not panic. They do not hesitate. They operate with precision, authority, and obedience to God's will. If this teaching is opening your eyes to how deeply and consistently God protects you beyond what you can see, subscribe to the channel now. In the final topic, we will complete Psalm 91 by revealing the ultimate promise of deliverance, honor, and fulfillment for those who love and trust God completely. Because He has set His love upon me, the final promise of deliverance, honor, and fulfillment. Psalm 91 reaches its climax not with human declarations, but with the voice of God Himself. After describing refuge, protection, covering, angelic intervention, and victory over hidden and visible threats, the psalm shifts perspective. God speaks directly, revealing the deepest reason behind all this protection. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. This moment transforms Psalm 91 from a description of divine action into a revelation of divine intention. Protection is not merely about safety, it is about relationship. Deliverance flows not from fear of danger, but from love for God. To set one's love upon God is not casual affection. It is intentional alignment. It is the decision to trust God not only when protection is needed, but as a way of life. This love is not based on outcomes, comfort, or convenience. It is rooted in commitment, surrender, and recognition of who God is. Psalm 91 reveals that this posture activates a deeper level of divine involvement. God does not simply respond to emergencies. He elevates those who love Him into a position where destruction loses access. The promise, "I will deliver him" here, goes beyond escape. It implies extraction from systems of harm, cycles of defeat, and environments of spiritual pressure. Deliverance is not always dramatic, but it is always decisive. God removes you from what would have consumed you. Sometimes He removes the danger, sometimes He removes you from its reach. Either way, the outcome is preservation. God then declares, "I will set him on high." This is not a metaphor for pride or elevation above others. It is positioning beyond reach. To be set on high means to be placed where certain threats cannot operate. Many attacks succeed because people remain within environments that feed them. God's elevation changes the environment itself. What once had access no longer does. What once influenced no longer reaches. This elevation is spiritual first, but it manifests practically. New boundaries form, new discernment emerges, new authority is exercised. The reason given for this elevation is knowledge of God's name. In Scripture, knowing God's name is not intellectual awareness. It is experiential relationship. It means understanding His character, trusting His nature, and aligning with His authority. Those who know His name do not panic in uncertainty. They do not collapse under pressure. They do not compromise under threat. They trust who God is, even when outcomes are not immediate. Psalm 91 then deepens the promise, "He shall call upon me, and I will answer him." This is not the prayer of desperation alone, it is the prayer of relationship. God does not merely hear cries, he responds. This response is not always immediate resolution, but it is always presence. I will be with him in trouble. This statement does not deny trouble, it redefines it. Trouble becomes a context for divine companionship rather than abandonment. God's presence in trouble changes everything. Trouble without God produces fear, confusion, and despair. Trouble with God produces endurance, clarity, and growth. Psalm 91 does not promise a trouble-free life. It promises a God-filled one. This distinction is crucial. Many believers lose faith, not because trouble comes, but because they expected God to remove all difficulty rather than to sustain them through it. Psalm 91 corrects this misunderstanding. God continues, I will deliver him and honor him. Honor follows deliverance. This means that survival is not the final goal. Restoration includes dignity. God does not rescue you only to leave you diminished. He restores reputation, confidence, purpose, and identity. Honor in Scripture often means public affirmation of what God has preserved privately. What the enemy attempted to destroy becomes evidence of God's faithfulness. The final promise seals the psalm. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Long life here is not merely length of years. It is fullness of purpose. It is completion of assignment. It is the ability to walk out what God intended without premature termination. Satisfaction implies fulfillment, not exhaustion. It means reaching the end without regret, knowing that your life aligned with God's will. God's salvation in this context is not limited to the afterlife. It includes deliverance in the present. It is the visible demonstration of God's involvement across time. Psalm 91 assures that those who dwell, trust, love, and remain aligned with God will see his saving power repeatedly, not just once. This final section reveals that protection is relational, not transactional. God is not bargaining safety in exchange for obedience. He is honoring relationship. Those who love him live differently. They listen differently. They respond differently. Their alignment creates an environment where protection operates naturally. Psalm 91 ultimately teaches that the safest place in existence is not the absence of danger, but closeness to God. Hidden traps lose relevance. Fear loses authority. Attacks lose effectiveness. Life itself becomes guided rather than threatened. This is not because danger disappears, but because God governs the outcome. As the psalm concludes, the reader is left with a choice. Not whether God can protect, but whether they will dwell. Not whether God is faithful, but whether they will trust. Not whether danger exists, but whether fear will rule. Psalm 91 invites you into a life where refuge is constant, protection is active, and love is the foundation of everything. If this final teaching has helped you understand the full depth of Psalm 91 and strengthened your trust in God's protection, subscribe to the channel now so you can continue growing in faith, clarity, and spiritual strength through future messages.